Welcome to Minerva, I'm Jo and I'm here today to do a sew along of the Tessuti Evie Bias Skirt. Tessuti Patterns are an independent company and they have their really own unique style. Their clothes are quite easy fitting and easy to make with quite large ease in the sleeves and across the bust. You can check out all of their patterns by going over to minerva.com. Today I'm making the Evie Bias Skirt, which means we need to be super careful how we cut out the fabric because we want the fabric to have a really nice drape and fit across the hip and the waist. The fabric that I'm using is a crepe, so it's nice and opaque, but it's got a really lovely movement and drape. So you need a fabric that drapes. You can't make this out of anything cotton or woven that's got a strong stable weave, because you need the bias to do its work by having a drape. You could try a rayon, a silk, a charmeuse, different types of crepe all work. Anything with lyocell or tencel, all of those fabrics that have a kind of fluidity will work for this skirt. The Evie Bias Skirt comes in sizes 6 to 18. Which is 69 centimetres waist through to a 96 centimetre waist. The hip is 91 centimetres through to 121 centimetres, but obviously you're going to get different types of movement and a slight variation in sizes depending on the fabric that you choose. You can make the dress with a zip opening, which is the one that I'm doing today, or you can also make it with an elasticated waist, which would be slightly easier. The length of the skirt is not changeable really. It's 76 centimetres from hip to hem, and you can add a little bit, but if you start adding much larger amounts, then you'll change the shape of the bias cut. It's also very difficult to shorten it because you'd need to shorten it not from the bottom, because then you would take all the fullness out. You would need to shorten it from somewhere else. So if you're experienced, that's great. Otherwise, it's 76 centimetres. The pattern has finished garment measurements on, which I absolutely love, because I think sometimes we measure ourselves and try and fit into a size category, but really we need to know the finished garment measurements so that we can decide how much ease we would like to wear in our clothes. I'm going to show you some cutting out tips over at the cutting table, but a few things to note in that section of the video. I am using quite a large piece of fabric, so it was difficult to show you, but really you're looking for that 45-degree angle. So you don't bring your selvage to your selvage, you're looking to fold your fabric into a square shape so that you can draw a line for the bias, open it out, and then put your pattern piece on using the bias line on the pattern with the drawn line on your fabric. The front and back pieces are the same in this pattern, so there isn't a front and a back which are different. They are both the same, but you will need to make your pattern piece by tracing off half, which is provided, and you create the other half and take them together so you get a full pattern piece. This pattern uses tearaway interfacing to stabilise the waistline and around the zip. I'm using some iron-on interfacing and I'm leaving it on so that you can see which parts I'm sewing. If I tore it away, then it would be difficult to see on a solid colour whether I'm talking about the front of the fabric or the back. So I've left all of the interfacing on, but you would be sewing your interfacing in and then trimming it out afterwards. first part of the pattern is to overlock your side seams. Now, if you don't have an overlocker, you might be using a zigzag stitch on your machine, which is fine too. Just bear in mind what sort of fabric you have. I've got a crepe, which is quite stable. It will take some overlocking, it will take some zigzag. If you've got a finer fabric, you might need to hand overcast those side seams. Think about the best way to treat your side seams depending on what fabric you've chosen. I'm overlocking mine, just keeping the fabric nice and straight so it doesn't ripple or pull. I've done the side seam but not across the waist. Next, we're going to add the interfacing to the waistband and the zip so that we can stabilise the fabric to add the binding and the zipper. Remember, I'm using a glue-in iron-on interfacing so that you will see my interfacing all the way through the sew-along. You'll be using either a tear-away interfacing or a sew-in interfacing that you can trim out or tear away at the end. The interfacing goes along the waist. Make sure you don't get any bubbles. And the same on the other side. Next, you're going to put the interfacing around the zip. Use the templates from the pattern, and that will mean that your zip goes in without bobbling your fabric. Next, we're going to sew the side seam, the side that has the zip on. So we're preparing to put the zip in. We'll be sewing from the hem, not all the way to the end. We'll be leaving the end open so that we can insert the zip. Just pin the waistline together so that it all stays in line, and then match up the side notch. You'll know that you've got the right sides together if you've got the notch in the right place. And you also need to make sure that the hem is very level because it's such a narrow hem you can't absorb that into a hem allowance. There's a little bit of ease there just at the bottom, so make sure you're pinning out the ripples. Let's measure the zip and the opening. So there's a notch mark, and then 2 inches down from there, make another mark, and that is where you will start sewing from. I like to put in 2 pins so that I know to stop at that point. Don't sew over the zip. Sew from the hem up to that mark you made 2 inches below the zip notch. To finish the rest of this seam, we're going to change our stitch to a long basting stitch and carry on with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to press that seam open in preparation for putting in the invisible zip. During a sew along, I like to follow the instructions as they are in the pattern so that you can refer back to any instruction. The invisible zip today is put in a different way to how I would normally put one in, but I'm going to follow the instructions so that you can follow along too. Mark 5/8 down from the top of the waistband and mark a line. That is where your zipper stop is going to land. Put your zip right side down, that's the side that you can't see the teeth. Put your zip stop at the bottom of the mark and pin the zipper tapes to the seam allowance. While you're doing this, you want to ensure that the centre of the zip is running down the centre of that seam line. Pin down the other side of the zip as well and sew it just on the edge. So this is a basting stitch, it's just holding it in place, and now you're going to take the original basting line out. So you will reveal the centre of the zip. So from the back it'll be basted on both sides, but we will have taken out all of that basting that we did on the first line. There's a little bit left just there, So that's just to reveal the teeth so that we can unzip the zip. We've got some handling room now to use our invisible zipper foot, just as close as we can to the teeth. If you use a zipper foot, the little guide at the front will push the teeth out of the way, and the groove on the back will run along the zipper teeth. It works like this, and the little point at the front guides the zip teeth out of the way. Sew down as far as you can, and you will stop before the zip pull. Don't bout forwards and back. So the main part of the zipper is in, really nice, really smooth, neat on the inside. And now we're going to look at how to finish the bottom part of the zip. Right, so we're going to find the end of our zip and the end of our side seam and sew between the two. We need to seamlessly join from the side seam a couple of stitches to the bottom of the zip, and you'll need a close foot to do that. So we're going to sew the other side first. This was the one with 2 notches, so mark the notches first and ease in the fabric in between. Sew this side seam again from the hem up to the waistline. And press this seam open. Once you've got the zip in place, you are then going to start working on finishing the waist. It's got a bound edge and it's quite a few processes to get the binding onto the top of your skirt, but it makes the skirt stable around the waist so that it doesn't stretch out, and it also makes a nice clean finish. Next, you've got your bias cut waistband piece. It's got that little bit of stretch to go around a curve, and we'll have a little bit of room at the end for handling and folding under. With that little bit of extra tape at the end, fold the zip back on itself so that the teeth are exposed on the edge, and pin down the zipper tape to the bias strip. And you need to stretch the bias strip just a little bit of tension on it all the way around, not lots, because you'll pull the waist out of shape, but you do just need to just give it a little stretch like that, pin it in place, and we're going to do that all the way around. Little stretch and pin. Just make sure on the side seam you're keeping all of the seam allowance flat so that the tips don't fold down or make the edge bulky. You'll have a little bit of spare on the end, but again, make sure the zip tape is folded back and pin it in place. Keep that because you'll need it for handling. Then you're going to machine sew all the way around. You'll have a raw edge. Once you've sewn it on, you're then going to fold the band to the back and pin from the right side. But the raw edge will still be on the inside, so don't worry about that. That will be folded in on the next stage. Pin from the right side, and then we're going to sew along the edge of the tape. So you'll be sewing along the edge of the tape really close, because we've got to get 2 lines of stitching on there. We've got that little bit of raw edge and that will be enclosed. If you need to trim that raw edge out, you can, and then you're going to put another line of stitching close to that black interfacing. But you will only see one stitch line from the right side. This is what it will look like when you've finished. There we are, look. There's one row of stitching from the right side and 2 rows along the binding from the inside. Lastly, we are going to work on the hem, but I'm going to hang my skirt, so I've clipped it in a straight line to the coat hanger. I'm going to hang my skirt for 24 hours and I'm going to see if anything happens to the hem. Does the fabric stretch out where I've cut it across the grain? Do I have stable side seams, but then I'm sort of waving out at the bottom? And that's a really important part of making any kind of bias item, a skirt, a top or a dress. You need to make sure that all of the hanging of the fabric is out of the way, otherwise you'll end up with a really uneven hem. So my hem has been hanging for 24 hours and you can see that I'm 1.5 centimeters different, especially on that widest part. The side seams have stayed quite stable, but just where I've cut along the bias here, I've got a little adjustment to make. It's a good idea to try it on because depending on which is the front and the back, if you've got a larger bottom, that 1.5 centimeters might be taken up with that. If you've got a larger tummy, you might need to even up your hem. So leveling your hem isn't about just having it straight from the top, hanging straight down. It's about leveling it to your body shape. I've leveled the hem using my skirt hammer, which you've just seen, and I've got a chalk line of where I want to cut my fabric, and then I will show you how to do the small rolled hem. First of all, you fold the fabric by 6mm and you sew it close to the edge. This is just a single layer with the raw edge on the left and the folded edge on the right. Try and keep it small. 5 or 6mm is ideal. And you will have a little bit of a raw edge there. Next, really carefully with some sharp scissors, you're going to cut that seam off. So it's called layering the seam. So just trim out that raw edge close to the stitch line. And finally, fold the fabric again and stitch following the previous line of stitching. Doesn't matter if you don't quite go over the top of the line. It's on the inside, but be as accurate as you can. So then you'll have 2 rows of stitching on the inside and 1 on the outside. And there we are, that's a super narrow hem. So it still gives your skirt lots and lots of movement along the hemline. Right, let's try it on. Okay, so you should have a skirt with lots of movement. If you've picked the right fabric, you can see why you need something with a drape. You can also see why you need to get that hemline nice and perpendicular to the floor, and the tiny little hem means you still get the ripple along the bottom. Your invisible zip should be invisible, so that's running straight into that side seam. And if you've cut your fabric correctly, you should have lots of movement across the hips, so it shouldn't be tight across your bottom or across your tummy, and that binding should be holding the waist together and in a stable position. The waist isn't up here, it is at your natural waistline, so it does hang a little bit lower down. So that's my skirt finished. I hope you've enjoyed that video. Cutting on the bias is slightly trickier. It requires a few more skills, lots more care at the cutting stage, and also a few little different techniques when you are sewing. You can try a really lightweight summer one by making a silk skirt. So this will be a very fine skirt. You might want to wear something underneath it, or you might just really want the silhouette of a light floating skirt. If you want something that's really eye-catching, then you could try a satin, because that's great with a bias cut because you get to see all of the sheen and movement of the fabric. This one is made in black satin, and doesn't it look absolutely stunning? If you like the look of this skirt but you want to make more of a summer version, then you can choose a rayon or a pattern fabric or a silk. I used a matte crepe, but you can also use a satin backed crepe, and then you've got a choice of finishes. So you can have that slinky satin finish, or you can have the matte finish on the crepe side. This is a crepe back satin in a ruby colourway. If you're looking for something summery and light to wear with plimp soles, pumps or sandals in the summer, then you can also try a viscose challis. This is a really popular design. It's got that navy blue background, lots of different colours to pick out. And this is available on our website. Nice things to wear with this skirt are small crop jumpers in the winter, or you can also try making the Ogden cami to wear on the top and make a full outfit. Thank you very much for watching. Do head over to Minerva and check out any kind of bias cut dress or skirt. There's some really great ones there. You'll see people showing how they got a good fit, how they made sure that they got that really nice curve across their hips. We would love to see any of your bias cut items, so if you've got something to share, then do make an account with us and show us what you've made. Thank you very much for watching. Do call again soon.